What is the core issue or problem that your talk is going to be addressing?
Yeah, at its core, global support organizations tend to optimize around internal metrics and organizational boundaries instead of customer outcomes. So over time, I feel like you drift towards fragmented ownership and customers fall through the gaps between teams. And it's about setting up the right incentives, especially as you scale from a single site into a global support team.
Okay. Fascinating. I feel like there's always a lot of pressure to talk to those key metrics. How do you balance that?
I think you need to, it really is about keeping the goal in mind, right? I'll go back to it with the customer focus. A lot of these support metrics are rational. Ticket closure times is a rational goal to pursue. However, there's a concept called cobra farming. I talk a little bit about it in the talk, but it really is about how incentives get twisted, and the incentives can end up driving behaviors that run against the stated goals of the business. So I think it's really important that as you have metrics for your operation, that they run consistent with the goals that you're trying to achieve as a company.
That makes sense. So who can be most impacted if an organization gets this wrong?
Obviously the customers, right? The customers will feel this. I think, obviously I've been in the support world for the entirety of my career, and I feel like support teams tend to bear this burden first. But it happens even inside of engineering teams. Ticket will come to one engineering team, and if the incentives are wrong, the incentive leads them to try to transfer ownership to another team, right? Keep my board clean and get this off of my board, as opposed to going the extra mile and trying to keep the customer in mind and resolve it without that sort of transfer and handoff. Because each jump, each handoff introduces an opportunity for context to be lost, adds delays in time and fragmented ownership, and it just exacerbates the problem.
So you obviously have a ton of experience. I want to understand like how you have personally experienced this, how someone can use your experience to identify if that situation or if this is happening in their organization.
Yeah. So I in the talk plan to go over, I've seen it both work and fail. Early in my career, I saw an attempt to move operational work from Boston to India, and it failed spectacularly. The organization really focused on transferring knowledge of workflows, and we were going to train them on the steps to this. And it wasn't viewed as like we're expanding our team overseas. And then I saw it done really well. I saw instances where you looked at it as growing the team and kept the local culture, kept the local identity, and kept that sense of ownership, the focus on the mission. All of that remained consistent while fostering sort of a positive culture that again, like allowed people to be different and embrace those differences, as opposed to trying to cookie cutter stamp one team to look exactly like another.
What are some of the signals someone can, if they're coming into a new organization that has potentially outsourced work just recently or is in process of doing it, what are some of the signals or some of the alarms someone can look for to understand if it's in process of being done correctly or potentially incorrectly?
Yeah, so there's easy ones like number of replies that happen on a support ticket or ticket transfers, things like that. First resolve, kind of one touch resolve metrics. Anything like that is generally a pretty good indicator. I talk a lot about incidents. I mentioned that I run network operations center teams, have for a long time. I feel like incidents it's where you get laid bare, right? Everything becomes apparent. And if you have an incident, you can't pull the right folks in, you end up seeing really long resolve times on incidents. Additionally, get feedback from your customers, NPS. How effective is your support team? Solicit that feedback proactively from customers, and they'll let you know if you're doing it right.
I love that. I love that getting the feedback, or even in today's world, we could probably use AI to pull that feedback out of the resolution or the conversations themselves. One thing that is interesting in listening to you is I feel like a lot of times the organizational setup is designed so that in tiers, right? And that if you have a tiering process, that can actually increase escalation volume. It can lengthen the time from issue to resolution of issue. How do you guide an organization to do that correctly when I feel like the industry norm is to set up tiers, and tier one is your lower cost, tier two, it works that way from a cost perspective is typically how people attack that. How do you
Again, I would go back to, if your incentive is labor costs, you're incentivizing the wrong thing. Your
Okay.
focus then becomes on controlling labor costs instead of improving customer outcomes, which really should be the only focus in this. So I generally also don't like tiered functions because it creates a pyramid organization where you're responsible for your rung, and then the next team is responsible for their rung. But customers don't experience org charts, they experience systems. They experience the whole system as one. So trying to differentiate, that's a tier one issue, that's a tier two issue. The customers don't see that, or they do, and it's in a bad way because they see that they have been handed off and that they're falling through the cracks.
That's super interesting. I think a lot of people in the audience will find that super interesting to hear more.